Storage cache core. I'm going to talk about Windows Server App Fabric caching. My name is Mohammad Faridi, and this is kind of the introduction I'll be doing for CodeCamp. Okay, so the agenda that we're going to cover is, at least in CodeCamp, there's going to be what, why, and motivations, physical architecture, the logical architecture, some demos on configuring, creating, administrating, creating a client, and more concepts and demos. And as you go along, or as we go along during the presentation, I'll point out the differences between the Azure App Fabric caching and the on-premises Windows Server App Fabric caching, which I will call App Fabric caching for commonality. Point out the differences if it's Azure or not. So we'll call everything App Fabric caching. So what is it? Well, App Fabric caching is a distributed in-memory key value cache that provides developers with a way of increasing performance, scalability, and writing data-centric code. Well, that sounds really good. It is really a distributed in-memory cache spread across multiple nodes, and clients and servers access the cache as a single entity. So what does that mean? So if you have these wonderful clients up here, and they're all accessing cache, to them it all seems like it's one single unified view. So if they say I'm looking for my DJ list right here, or my tracks, all these DJs accessing this service will be looking at one unified cache, and in the back end, it'll be hosted across multiple nodes. But to them, it doesn't look like it's anything different. Why? Why would you need something like that? Well, a lot of our applications today are data-centric. You know, whether you get them from a database, from service, from OData, from here, or you aggregate it, but they're all data-centric applications. And database calls can get expensive. And App Fabric is all about increasing performance and scalability by moving that data closer to the client, by reducing the pressure on the underlying system. Local caching has been, caching has been around for a long time. There's local caching solutions like the Enterprise Library Cache, but with that you always run into a single node hosting your cache. They've been limited by the availability of single node. Well, I'll just jump to what do we use it for? Well, we use it for three different things. We use it for reference data, activity data, and resource data. So reference data can be any lookup tables like your product catalog, your DJ track list, or top 10, top 20, top 100. Activity data as to shopping carts and things of that nature. Resource data, more inventory order and other core data transactions that are accessed concurrently for read or write. So what's really the motivation as you think about what it is, why do we need it, and what it's used for? So consider our simple web architecture here. We have a client here who's making a call through a load balancer to all our web servers, and the web servers are accessing our database. So usually what happens is with a single node solution like Enterprise Library Cache, you make a call through the web server, you get the data from the database, and then you cache it. Well, since it's a load balancer, probably round robin comes in, it goes to the same user might go to a different web server and might get the same data or similar data and cache it on the website. And it may happen again. Well, with App Fabric, what ends up happening is we get rid of that whole interaction. We add a cache server, a cache cluster. We'll do App Fabric server caching, and that in essence holds all the cache for the server nodes. So instead of each client calling in and going and talking to each client calling to a different web server, that hosting its own cache, the cache is hosted on a unified platform. Physical architecture. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about physical architecture, and this is kind of what the physical architecture looks like. In App Fabric Server Cache, we talk about a cache cluster, a cache server, administration, cache configuration, and a cache-enabled client. So a cache cluster is basically a collection of one or more instances of a cache host. that work together to provide this one unified view. So in essence, it's basically, think of it as the glue that holds everything together. So multiple servers that are out there, the cache cluster kind of holds it all together. Some of the things that the cache cluster manages are keeping the cache cluster running at all times, monitoring the ability of all cache hosts in the cache cluster, and helping with the cache host to join the cluster. So what is a cache host, you might ask? Windows Server App Fabric is a Windows service. Any server that runs that service is known as a cache host. There can only be one host per server, and there's no mixed mode. So you can't use your Windows Server App Fabric caching server as also a web server or a database server or something else. You want to have a dedicated configuration location. With each start of the cluster, the cluster goes out and looks at its configuration, reads what it needs to know in terms of how many servers are part of my cluster, what do I need to do with it, and your choices become XML or SQL, which also leads into lead host management and cluster management, which we'll get into later. But in essence, you kind of run into, if you have XML, your location, for cluster management, you have to deal with lead host, and with SQL Server, you have to deal with SQL Server as the lead host. We'll get into that a little later because that gets a little involved. And 10, 15 slides based on that. Administration PowerShell versus GUI. On the Azure side, you have this nice GUI front end. On the server side, you have to deal with PowerShell. Cache client, cache-enabled client. Any client that has a cache application is known as a cache-enabled client. Uses the caching assemblies. And going back to this architecture diagram, we have cache cluster, the hosts, which equate one-to-one to a server. We have a PowerShell-based administration, a cluster configuration, which could be XML or SQL, and any client that uses the XML or uses the Fabric assemblies to create a host that uses this cache is known as a cache-enabled client. With that, I will hopefully leave enough widget appetite for this Saturday, and we'll